co-authors this green construction guide for contractors with Build Green and Keen Engineering, now Stantec. We co-authored this book for the Greater Vancouver Regional District, and it was later adopted by the Canadian Green Building Council. So we've been teaching this externally and internally since then. We have an in-house Gold Seal approved course that we teach, and over 350 of our Legiscore employees have taken the course. And one of the things we're really proud of at this point, back when, is we took the involvement of the trades and we broke it out by specification section, because until that point, it was all by the credits, MRC2, EQC4. So all the trades would really have to read every single credit to try to figure out where they were involved. So that was something we were quite proud of back then. So where has it taken us? In the decades since this first project started, we've got 48 LEED projects on the books. We have a LEED Platinum project, actually, Gulf Islands Operations Center. It was the first certified LEED Platinum project in Canada, in Sydney. We have 33 projects that are registered and awaiting certification, meaning they really were built, designed and built to LEED standards. We're just waiting so that I can put them up there as some good numbers to show you what those numbers really mean. When you add it all up, we've got 7 million square feet and over $1.2 billion of LEED projects. This is U.S. Green Building Council, Canadian Green Building Council, new construction, core and shell, existing buildings. We did a building here. Another one we're waiting certification on is the Humboldt supported housing project here in Victoria. We have an office here in Victoria, 10 plus years working on the island. So for me personally, where do you go from here? For me personally, I went to the SBA Institute. I don't know if you've heard of the SBA Institute or the Sustainable Building Advisors Program in Victoria and Vancouver. It's run by Dallas Jasper, and she's here today somewhere. There she is, there's Dallas. You should really scope her out later and ask her about the program, because if you're a working professional and you're looking for more, this is of course for you. You can carry on working your day job and still go learn great things on your weekends. Amazing local instructors, local field trips. I can't say enough about the course. And being a course called Sustainable Building Advisors, what it really does is give you the tools to communicate. And I firmly believe this. If you can't communicate, you cannot participate. So truly the answer. One of the textbooks we use, if you could call it a textbook, is Jason McLennan's The Philosophy of Sustainable Design. The book is great. It's very practical. It's not a how-to, but it really showed me how I could use the philosophy in my own work. And I actually brought my book here today because I want to get Jason to sign it later. And the SBA course is also where I first learned of the Living Building Challenge. From some pioneers, really back in the early days, who had been working on living building projects. So they gave us a really good first look at living buildings. So what is the Living Building Challenge? The living building model views a building as an organism, and that's symbolized by the metaphor of a flower. Nature wastes nothing. And the living building tries to use that as an example. A living building uses a closed-loop approach to collecting their own energy, capturing their own water, and treating their own waste. The living building is also about, Living Building Challenge is about educating, inspiring, and motivating a global audience about the need for fundamental and transformative change. And we'll look at this more closely as we go through. The Living Building Challenge asks us to imagine a building designed and constructed to function as elegantly and efficiently as a flower. I call it the language of the dreamers, in a good way. What does a living building look like? This is Van Dusen Botanical Garden Visitor Center. It's 19,000 square feet, geometrically challenging. The project manager likes to say there are no right angles. It's a single-story structure. Green roof pedals that float over ram dirt and concrete walls. The green roof is actually really interesting. It goes from ground level to 2 stories high. And a fun fact on the Van Dusen, it's a single-story structure. In order to work around the existing neighborhood in the Botanical Garden, we actually had the tallest crane in Vancouver to build this single-story building. The other project that I'd like to talk about is the SFU University Child Care Center, dramatically different looking. The university itself is up on top of Burnaby Mountain. The university is a compact, mixed-use, transit-oriented community at the top of the mountain. Fantastic views where it's not foggy. She really had some weather issues. But the community itself is a great example of we want a living building in this community. Where can we go from here? That's what SFU Community Trust was saying. What can we do next? What can we do better? So they decided they wanted a living building. And I thought it really fit because the daycare up the mountain, they use a teaching method called the Reggio Emilia teaching method. Reggio Emilia has 3 teachers. There's the educators, the environment, and the community. So the daycare itself is actually a laboratory for learning. Makes sense. So I'm here to talk to you today about living the challenge. I actually went through the BuildX program this year, called it Living Through the Challenge. Lighten it up for you guys. Live the challenge. These are the first 2 photos I thought of when I heard living building challenge. Imagine a building designed to function as elegantly, efficiently as a flower. Now imagine your superintendent tell his guys, hey guys, we're building a flower. Just ask any superintendent or foreman and they will say, just tell me what I need to know. So this really was a challenge. How are we going to translate this? How are we going to do this? And then I read a quote, and the quote said, all men of action are dreamers. And it kind of helped to clarify it for me. Okay, so we've got the living building program, men of action. We're all dreamers. We're going to pull this thing off. And we really were pioneering. This really was out of everybody's comfort zone and on those really roughest days. We'd say, imagine this is the first living building in Canada. And imagine your name being on it. Living Building Challenge has 7 pedals or performance areas. And this looks a lot like green, other than when you get to the bottom, we're talking about beauty and equity. Those are things that other green building rating systems that I know of haven't taken into account yet. The pedals are divided into imperatives. Think of an imperative as a prerequisite, and all the imperatives are mandatory. And the best example that I can explain this is, think of LEED, think of the site selection category. In the site selection category, you have 1 prerequisite, and you have 26 possible points that you can choose from. With the Living Building Challenge, you would have to actually achieve all of those points to get the pedal. It's all or nothing. And there are never more than 20 imperatives on any type of project. This is the glass up at SFU where they've actually worked the dandelion and flower metaphor right into the glass. There are only 2 rules. All imperatives are mandatory, and certification is based on actual performance, not design models. It's not how it was designed to perform, it's how it actually performs. So there's a 12-month period after occupancy that the building has to be operating before you can apply for certification. The 12 months can start at any time, which is great because it takes a while for the designers, the operators, to figure out these new systems and technologies and how they're going to actually balance this out, figure out plug loads and the occupants. So this is looking at all of the imperatives and the pedals, and over on the right we have mostly involved in, which is the health pedal. And the big heavy hitter is the material pedal, which I'll go into these. The first thing we tried to do, as I said, with LEAD, we tried to make it trainable and repeatable. So we created suites of documents for all of our different types of LEAD projects, whether they're U.S. Green Building Council or Canadian Green Building Council, whether they were commercial interior, new construction, core and shell. We created suites of documents. So all the trades that we have worked with for all these years are used to seeing our specific paperwork. So we tried to emulate that look. It's nothing the same. But we tried to emulate the look so that it wasn't so foreign to the trades. And let's look at the site pedal. So the site pedal, there are 4 imperatives. And first one is called limits to growth. So that talks about you can only build on a brown field or a gray field. The other one is called urban agriculture, where from 0 to 80% of your site must be used for growing food, depending on your floor area ratio. And Habitat Exchange says, for every hectare of land we use in the development, an equal hectare will be set aside in perpetuity. And in the case of SFU, the SFU Community Trust, the whole university at the top of the mountain is 65 hectares. Well, the Community Trust put aside 320 hectares on the side of Burnaby Mountain, which basically doubled the Burnaby Mountain conservation area. And the 4th imperative of the site pedal is called car-free living. It doesn't mean you can't own an automobile. It just simply talks about your ability to have a healthy, productive lifestyle without having to hop in your car to go to the store for milk to take your kids to school. And the energy pedal. There's only one imperative, because 100% of the energy requirements must be made by renewable energy on a net annual basis. No trouble there. And basically, with the Living Building Challenge, they do not tell you how to get there, just that this is where you need to end up. So you have to create all the energy that you're going to use for all your heating, cooling, and electricity requirements on a net annual basis. This is the solar chimney or the Oculus at Van Dusen up on the main roof. You can see some of the solar there as well. At SFU, we did some scale jumping, which is allowed. So unlike LEED, you can work outside of your actual project boundary. And we have a hot water, solar hot water system. So basically, we feed the hot water into the neighborhood hot water facility, and then we just sip it back as we need it at the daycare. So the amount that we're generating and feeding into that utility is actually more than enough for all our heating and electrical requirements at the daycare on a net annual basis. And water pedal. So the water pedal, again, there's 2 imperatives, right? So the water pedal says you will capture all the water that you need on the project, and you will treat 100% of the storm water and building water discharge. So again, it's looking at the closed loop system. Here's our rainwater tank, and the next speaker is going to tell you a lot more about this than I can. But at SFU, we do capture the rainwater, and we have a bit of a conundrum between the city of Burnaby and Fraser Health. So in the end, Fraser Health said, okay, we'll take your system where you're treating the water and you can use it as potable water, and we'll allow that. But the city of Burnaby said, you know what? You must chlorinate that water. And we can't use chlorine because it's a red listed item. So we had to come up with kind of a solution. The tap water, the drinking water, is from a municipal source. We use our captured rainwater for flushing the toilets and for the washing machines. until such time as the law changes to catch up with where we're at. That was the solution. At Van Dusen, they were working with the City of Vancouver, and as you know, the City of Vancouver is striving to be the greenest city by 2020. The City of Vancouver okayed the system, and they're UV treating the water and using it for potable. We had a funny story about that too, is we're not allowed to use our captured rainwater for irrigation. So again, getting the standards up to where we are. We're ahead of the standards now. Let's work on that. This is a bioreactor being lifted into place at the XFU to treat the black water. Okay, the materials petal. The materials petal talks about endorsing products and processes that are safe for all species through time. And there are a bunch of imperatives here. I don't miss any. So there's a material and chemical red list, which I'll show you. Embodied carbon footprint, which talks about a one-time carbon offset for the project. Responsible industry, which talks about third-party certified standards for all raw material use, which is really talking about waste management. This is the solar chimney at Van Dusen from the inside now of the lobby. So here's the red list. When we started, I didn't even know what a phthalate was. I had never heard that term. And the Living Building Challenge will say, okay, any material that you're substituting for one that regularly has red listed items in it, you will research. We had to research every single material because we had no idea what had red listed items in it. And we found out quickly there's cadmium in metals, there's phthalates in plastic, neoprene in gaskets, there's PVC in flooring and roofing and pretty much everything. This is a challenge. I was speaking at a Buildex conference and I put this slide up and said, we can't use these materials, and one fellow actually walked out. And I thought, oh, that was kind of rude. And later he came up and he said, I'm so sorry, but when you showed that, I know I will never be able to do that. I don't need to sit through this, I can't do it. So that's where we're at with the red list. This slide, it's kind of an ugly slide, but it's the best example that I can tell you of how of the challenge of the Living Building Challenge. So I call this slide the tale of the perimeter drain tile. And I'll tell you the tale. At Van Dusen, for the perimeter drain tile, the specification called for either PVC, HDPE, the high-density polyethylene, or a rigid ABS. So we knew right away, we can't use PVC, that's a red listed item. So we went to the subtrade, who went to the supplier, and asked what was out there. So they came back and they said, you have two choices of perforated pipe. You can either use the HDPE or PVC. So again, we knew we couldn't use PVC, so we got the shop drawings and we submitted them for the HDPE. They came back rejected. HDPE didn't conform to the CSA standards. So now we're at an impasse. There is no alternative that was applicable for the City of Vancouver standards and the Living Building Challenge standards. So we went back to the City of Vancouver and we asked for an exemption, and eventually we got an okay to manually drill holes in rigid ABS piping to CSA spacing requirements. The reason I tell this story is because from the time the question was first raised to the time we got an answer was 2 months and 6 days. If you work on a construction project, then you know that perimeter drain tile is something you can scope out, you can do the contract, you can hire the trade, you can have this thing done in a week. So that's my best example of a challenge on a schedule of a Living Building Challenge project. So responsible industry says all wood must be FSC certified or salvaged or for the intentional harvest site. With some caveats. And the raw materials, as I said, that we would advocate for third-party certifications, the metal, stone, rock, timber. And that's so that they can try to be sure that these kind of materials are being environmentally sound extracted, and also that they're using fair labor practices. So FSC, you worked on LEED projects, you get 50% FSC. This doesn't say that. This says 100% of all the lumber used on site must be FSC or salvaged. We had, in our example, up in the Okanagan College, they had fought and won the battle to be able to use pine beetle kill, or denim pine. So they had already won that one for us, so we used a lot of the pine beetle on our project. And another thing to note, if you think okay, well, FSC, we know how to do that. They also say all tangible lumber on a Living Building Challenge project will be FSC pure. So if you think, okay, usually you get those door cores that are FSC, that's great, but the veneers, it's okay because we're only going for 50%. That's not the case here. All tangible lumber must be FSC pure. And for doors and things like that, we found it was easier to get salvaged than FSC pure. Appropriate sourcing. So the thing to note here, as with the material and chemical red list, this is for 100% of all materials. This is the CSI Master Format 2004, the 48 division, and it speaks to all divisions. So the mechanical trades are involved, the electrical trades are involved, those ones that don't usually have a lot to do on a LEED project. Now they're looking at where did they get those equipment, what's in those gaskets, what's in every piece of equipment, where did it come from, what's in it. Right away we found, okay, everyone's filthy, LEED's filthy. Well, no, you can't. Filthy comes from Germany. That's not within our appropriate sourcing zone. So this is what the actual sourcing zone looks like, and these were the footnotes. So I don't expect you to read the footnotes, and we didn't expect that the subtrades would read them either. This was leaving way too much room for error. So we actually came up with a site-specific sourcing matrix for each of our projects. So we just went through the specifications, and we literally took every division and just spelled it out in one spreadsheet. So again, no room for error. So this was our zone from SFU. 500 kilometers is the zone. It's not 500 miles or 800 kilometers. It's not 2,400 kilometers by rail or sea. And it's not 800 kilometers to the manufacturing facility, and then you have another 800 to the extraction. 500 kilometers was our zone 1 for our heavy density items. So we could go from Prince George to Spokane and down to Salem, Oregon. That was our appropriate sourcing zone. Conservation and reuse. So this is our waste management, and this talks about, as with LEED, we're going to divert all the garbage from the landfill, except we're looking now at our base as being the same as exemplary performance in LEED and even higher. So if you've ever worked on a LEED project, you know we can get to 50%, we can get to 75%, that's not a problem. If you're looking at 95%, now you're talking about green waste, organic waste, having 3 separate bins to throw out your coffee cups, one for the lid, one for the cup, and one for the tea. Composting the lunch waste, that kind of strategies, that's what you have to do to hit these targets. And also, not just construction waste, but they look at, during the design, the construction, the operations, and the end of life. So it's a much broader look at waste management. And indoor quality, so the health pedal. The health pedal really says, you know what, we're not going to focus on all of the ways that the indoor air quality could be compromised. We're just going to look at what we need to do. They expect all best practices are being met. The health pedal has a healthy air imperative. We look at civilized environment, which talks about every occupiable space having operable windows. So again, it's not like daylight and views where you can choose it. every occupiable space must have operable windows. Healthy air talks about separate ventilation for your coffee rooms, your janitor rooms, your kitchen, that kind of thing. And biophilia, my favorite one to talk about, talks about natural shapes and forms. And smoking must be prohibited. This was something I note here because we had to switch out a couple foremen who couldn't do it. They said, well, no, we can smoke at least until we get the building closed in. No, you can't smoke in the project boundary, period. So literally guys have to be switched out. And I also suggest putting ashtrays around the perimeter of the building where you will spend every afternoon picking up cigarette butts. So they don't actually call for, there is no emissions limits table. When we do that air test to occupancy, we don't have a baseline that we're working to, but we thought, you know what, that's a bit too open. We're going to just set up an emissions limits table and just use the South Coast Air Quality Management District rule limits so that everyone has a baseline. You will not use more than this as far as your VOCs. It's just, again, less room for air. This is just showing, just outside of the shot is a back door going out to the giant sandbox, the SFU. So the kids walk across the petty mat up the little stairs to the sink, wash their hands and carry on. Beauty and inspiration. Beauty is a precursor to caring enough to preserve, conserve, and serve the greater good. And I used to say, you know what? We leave this to the professionals. And my bosses who have seen me speak said, you can't say that. We are the professionals. But I don't think you really want your contractor to confine beauty on a project. So the way that I thought about it is, you know what? Beauty is getting harder and harder to build. So how do we adapt? Here, enter BIM. Even I could see right away, before BIM, these roof area calculations would have been murder on the estimators. And this just shows from concept to reality of those living building pedal roofs. This is a sign at SFU, and it says, there's a tank buried next to the building where tiny organisms scrub the dirty water from our toilets and sinks. And I think this is great because the kids, first of all, it's translated it into a very kid-friendly language. And when the kids go off into elementary school, they're going to say, well, how come there's not tiny organisms scrubbing my toilet water here? It's redefining what is normal. And the equity pedal. So the equity pedal talks about accessibility for all. The building has to follow the ADA, or the American Disabilities Act. And human scale and humane places. So this is a salvage wood floating stage, child-sized stage. I thought that was a good example of the equity pedal. And this is at conception. I just wanted to show this because this here is actually a channel. When the rainwater tank is full, there's a lookout platform up top where the kids can actually pull a lever and they'll be able to release the water all throughout the whole site, so they can actually play in their environment. This is the concrete pour plan. I had to take this from the superintendent because I thought this was amazing. And he said, okay, if you take it, you have to tell them we're at the top of a mountain, and it was the middle of December when we were pouring all this concrete. And this is how it turned out. Some of the features of the daycare in the end. And of course, it really became a living building when the children arrived. Now, this is a living building. Just watching how they interacted with this environment was amazing. So, in closing, I'd just like to say the Living Building Challenge was created to change the way that we design and build buildings. It was created to transform the way that code officials and manufacturers think about buildings and products. So it's amazing how much one single building can actually change an entire design community. And I think these two projects are just really good examples that transformative change really is possible.